Welcome back, guys. Gaston right here. So today we are going to be talking about the brand new Leica 43mm, and this video has finally a sponsor, which is my own company, Crown. And as you guys can see, I actually designed a strap for this camera, and this one is called the 43 strap, you know, because it's the same gray as the color of the leatherette of the camera. So if you're interested to see some of the straps that I make them in rope, leather, wrist strap, and many other options. Link is going to be down in the description. So let's actually dive in with this review. Another thing that I like about the Q line is the inclusion of the tilt screen. And because of the nature of how I shoot, I tend to shoot a lot from the waist and even lower. So having a screen like this, you know, would allow me to frame a lot of the shots without the need of me having to dive in on the floor just to get those shots. That's my only option when I shoot with the Leica M11 monochrome. You know, I just have to go down, and if I can refrain from doing that, that's going to be a plus. But another reason why I like shooting with the screen sometimes is because I could be very close to a person, take a picture, and a lot of the times, like this image right here, they wouldn't even notice me, you know, taking a picture of themselves. So when it comes to being a little bit more concealed, you know, with your photography, I think the screen is a great tool to use. And you're gonna hear some mixed opinion from different people, but for me, it does works really good. Now let's talk about the battery life on these cameras. From the Leica Q3 20mm, Leica has upgraded this battery to one that has a little bit more of a battery life. Removing these batteries is super simple. You know, we have the same system now in the Leica's M11, and this one is gonna give you great battery life, and I've gone, you know, a full day of shooting with one single battery. But there is a tip that I gotta tell you guys, and it is something that I do. I turn off the screen. Just set up one of these buttons to turn off the screen, like so. It's this one right here. And by the way, you can always configure any button by depressing the button and selecting the function that you want in the button. So for example, this one, if I depress it, you are gonna see that I chose to toggle between LCD and the EVF. And that's how I turn on and off my display. So like so. And you know, when I put my eye there, the viewfinder is going to enable and turn on only when I need it. Now that's going to allow you to save a lot of battery life. And the other thing that I disable is the optical image stabilization of the lens. This camera does not have IBIS, and the stabilization, it is on the lens. Also, this camera doesn't have a mechanical shutter. This camera has the shutter on the lens. It features a leaf shutter that has a speed of 1/2000 of a second, mechanically leaf shutter, and then it goes up to 1/16,000 of a second digitally, and that is something that you may want to use in bright daylight, specifically if you're shooting wide open at f2. I've never find myself having to go over the 1/2000 of a second, specifically because when I do street photography, it is usually during the day, and I always use an aperture of at around f11, which is the way that I like to shoot. Now let's talk about aperture and the manual capability of this lens, or the pseudo manual capability of this lens, because when it comes to street, I like to set up my lens, you know, manual. So basically what I do, I disengage this tab right here, and the moment you do that, you have manual control of this lens. And another thing that I like is that the throw of this lens is kind of like an M manual lens, you know, 90-degree throw, you know, and it has a hard stop, which it allows me to kind of by muscle memory knowing where I am in my distance. And if I flip the camera, you can see the distance scale right there. So I choose an aperture, and then I would choose a distance, you know, for example, 2 meters right there. And I know that if I gauge that distance about 2 meters, my image is going to be in focus. So shooting with my Leica M11 monochrome, or the M11P, and combining it with this camera, you know, it's a very seamless kind of like interaction, you know, when choosing both cameras. But if I want that autofocus, you know, reliability, all you have to do is lock this tab one more time, and the camera is going to engage automatically in that autofocus mode. Now, when it comes to the autofocus, as you can see, you have several modes right there to choose from. The autofocus intelligent, then you have the autofocus single and continuous. The one thing that I don't like about, there is going to be a blackout. Let me show you that. See, there's a little bit of blackout every time you take a picture. And I would have hoped that by now Leica would have gotten rid of that blackout. Now, someone told me that if I shoot in the continuum mode, there's no blackout, but as you can see, I'm in continuous mode right now and there's still blackout. So going back to which one is the better camera, that is gonna be a very personal question. In my opinion, if you are going to be doing street photography, I talk from my personal experience, I find the Leica Q3 28 a little bit more versatile for that discipline, for street photography, being very close to the scene, including as much as possible of the context, of what you're shooting. The 28 is gonna give you that. But if you're someone like myself that also loves to shoot portraits, I enjoy this camera a lot more for portrait photography on the streets because, like I mentioned before, I get a greater background separation. I don't get that, horrible distortion from a 28mm, specifically when you get that close. And you're gonna have to get that close if you want background separation with the Leica Q3 28mm. And once again, when it comes to product photography, a camera to have at the studio, this camera is going to be, in my opinion, the one to choose. And even for street photography, like I mentioned before, 35 is where it's at for me for my street photography. Just approaching the scene a little bit different, much further. It gives me a similar result. Of course, the 35 has that 35mm look, but I could actually accomplish, a lot of things. May not be a camera that I may actually want to bring if I'm going to be shooting some environmental or architecture. Like, for example, the last time I went to the Oculus, you can see right here, I brought my Leica M11 monochrome and then my 21mm Elmar. Not even 28 would be wide enough for me to shoot in that space. You can see some of the images right now that I shot at the Oculus. So, this one is going to be just another tool, and for a lot of people, the 43mm may be the one camera to get. Also, the 43mm makes this camera very unique. There are not a lot of options out there, if any, that can give you a 43mm in such a powerful compact body, full frame, 60 megapixel. I think that this camera sits, at the top of its own food chain because there's nothing that can compete with this camera. One of the things that I like about the Leica Q3 that to me has been detrimental, it is the fact that right now, these cameras, have USB-C. So I can charge this camera in the car. I can actually charge the camera in the bag with a power bank. And I know that I have juice, on the go. Now, when it comes to Leica Q3 43mm, there is something that I have to demonstrate and you have to be aware. So as you see right now, I actually have a UV filter on top of the front element. And I'm actually gonna put the lens that came with the camera. Now, look what happens if I want to engage in the macro mode. As you can see, I cannot go in the full position there. And that is because the UV filter is colliding with the inside of this lens hood. Now, this is something that did not happen with the Leica Q3. And it happened in this camera because Leica wanted to make these two bodies, the Leica Q3 and the Leica 43, to appear that they have about the same length when it comes to the lens. But the lens on the Leica Q3 43 is a little bit longer. So what Leica has done, they have actually shortened this lens hood just to give you the appearance when they are in the camera that the lens is actually the same length as the one on the Leica Q3 28mm, but it's not. So if you want to overcome this issue of putting a UV filter in your camera and also using a lens hood, the options are going to be removing the lens hood when you want to go into macro mode, which I rarely use macro mode, so for me it's not a big deal. Or you're going to have to get one of these vented lenses. Leica sells them, and there are also some aftermarket ones that then would allow you to engage in the macro mode without any issue, as you can see, because of the design of this lens hood, you're not going to have that problem. Something to keep in mind, it's not a big deal. Some people have been making a big deal, but it is not a big deal for me. So this is going to be the end of the video, guys. If you want to learn more, please follow me on social media. I post a lot of content, Leica content, on Threads at Gaston Shutters. Also, you can go check out my work right there on Instagram at Gaston Shutters. And for my camera strap line, go visit on Instagram, Al Crown. The website is supposed to be done very, very soon. So right now, if you want one, DM me via Al Crown on Instagram. And until then, I will see you in the next video.